Paranormal. That cannot be explained by scientific methods.
Told of a creature that was 6.5 to 7 feet tall.
The CIA ran secret mind control experiments.
It's a tale of a creature that's been seen by many, but believed by few.
And experts say there have been reported sightings of paranormal activity.
And there was this creature, and it ran down this hill.
They say something was flying over their house, and they have no idea what it was.
How the world's most powerful individuals are actually shape-shifting reptilians.
My scariest ghost hunting experience.
Jason and JV.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. Can't handle the truth. Who would it now?
Beyond reality. Radio.
It's Monday on the West, Tuesday on the East. Many of you are stuck somewhere in between. Welcome to Beyond Reality Radio with myself, Jason Hawes, and the always awesome JV Johnson.
Can you hear the fan? Do you hear that fan blowing on me right now?
No.
Good, because it is so hot in here, and I need
it. But it looks like Fabio with your hair going.
Yeah, well, you know, it's that 80s windblown look.
Yeah, I get that same thing all the
time. Yeah, we've got storms rolling through. It's so hot everywhere. It's really unbearable, and it's making me really grouchy and just incredibly angry.
So you're normal.
Yeah, my normal self. Yeah.
Hey, I do want to give a shout out to a very close friend of mine and practically a brother, Grant Wilson. His mother did pass away today. Yeah. And, I just, all the love in the world to him and his entire family. And, just so they know, they're in all our prayers. And I've talked to him a couple times. And, it's tough. It really is. And I wish him the best.
There are very few losses that people feel that are as impactful as the loss of a parent. So I know what he's going through, and my heart as well to you, Grant. Right. Stay strong, my friend.
All right. So, anyways, so we got a great show. Anyways, head over to Facebook.com/Beyond Reality Radio, like the Facebook page for us. Then head to BeyondRealityRadio.com. You can find all the stations we air on across the country. You can download the free iPhone and Android app, which allows you to listen live, catch past shows all on the go, and so much more. Or just listen right from the website at Night We're Live. Just click the Listen Live button in the upper right-hand corner, and you can hang out in the chat room. GV, myself, great community people are usually there, and so forth. Today, Jim, it was Amazon's Prime Day, right?
Yeah, I don't really know what that means, but I saw something about it. Yeah,
it's all their huge deals. I mean, they give you this like wicked, incredible deals for 30-some-odd hours and all that stuff, and it would have been great. Except that the site crashed and crashed and crashed, and it kept on crashing. So if you know anybody who tried to buy something on Amazon, or you may have, if you yourself tried, I'm sure you had a hard time because Amazon's website crashed as soon as Prime Day began. Amazon's website had been experiencing issues for hours due to heavy online traffic. And it got worse and worse, and it kicked in, literally Prime kicked in at 3 p.m. Eastern time. At 3:05, their site started going down.
I'm sure Robert Mueller is on the case. I'm sure the Russians had something to do with it, and I'm sure that it'll come out after about 200 subpoenas.
Nothing to say about that one, but and it's not clear how widespread the outage was, but it was going pretty much. I mean, the entire U.S. was having issues with, and I'm sure everywhere else. But and the weird thing is, Jim, you were getting when they were having these problems. All right, so it would just constantly pop up with a random picture of somebody's dog.
That's what would show up?
And I guess it was in pictures of employees' dogs. I don't know. That's what one of the reports are saying. Just random pictures of employees' dogs.
That's more interesting, one of those site down messages that you get.
And it kept on saying, oops, something went wrong and everything else. But last year on Amazon's Prime Day, they generated an estimated of $1 billion in sales from their 30-hour event, which roughly equates to about $34 million every hour. So other estimates say that it was closer to $2.8 billion. But they were expecting $4+ billion in sales from this Prime Day. And this thing kept on popping up. Well, some alerts went out, and they acknowledged the issues on Twitter and so forth, saying that there were still like 30 hours left or whatever. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, not sure, but Amazon crashing can't handle the traffic, the very traffic they're putting out there for.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if it was regular usage traffic or if there was some type of hacker traffic going on, because I know that even things like the PlayStation Network and gaming networks get hit by these hackers and they just flood data. I can't remember what there's a word for it, where they just flood the servers with meaningless data, and it just makes them crash. And they do it intentionally. It'd be interesting to see if there was a competitor or a foreign nation or some other type of nefarious activity going on there to intentionally make Amazon's servers crash, or was it just that much of an increase in usage over last year's Prime Day that they weren't prepared for it? It'd be interesting to know the answer to that.
Well, so far they haven't come out and fully admitted everything, but it's looking like it just was the amount of traffic that was hitting the website. They haven't come out and said anything about being attacked by hackers or anything of that nature. So we'll have to see what happens. But I mean, definitely sucks. I mean, a lot of people were waiting for this, and they just couldn't get on and place their orders.
Be interesting also to see if they have a redo. Let's try it again whenever. But see,
Exactly.
trying to make up for it. I mean, a lot of people would be angry. So, but we have a great show tonight for you. It's not going to have anything to do with anything we've talked about so far. But we've got Jeremy FInley joining us on the program. He is an author and a journalist. He's an investigative reporter. He's got a new novel out that's called The Darkest Time of Night. It's been hailed as the Close Encounters of the new generation. So it's going to be an interesting discussion about that. But even more interestingly, he, as an investigative reporter, he has done some phenomenal work. Some very high profile, nationally and even internationally recognized cases have come out of his work. And we'll be talking about that stuff with him.
Yeah, we'll be bringing those up. And I think a lot of you will be extremely surprised to find out some of the things that he has been involved in.
Yeah, it's some groundbreaking stuff. He's, you bring him right up there with the work that Woodward and Bernstein did. Of course, the guys that broke Watergate. He's done some political scandal stuff. He's done some corporate scandal stuff, and a lot of great work. So we'll be talking about all of that with him.
All right. And we got some great shows coming up throughout the week. Tomorrow we've got Bernie Taylor, a naturalist and thought leader. He'll be on the show discussing alternative circles and just a lot of different things, possibly getting into things with Atlantis, aliens, and you name it. And then Wednesday, we've got Jennifer Longmore, soul purpose coach, past life regressionist, author, and we'll be discussing if your past lives impact your ability to make money today.
Yeah, and Thursday night, Michael Bryan will be with us. He's a travel psychologist talking about books that he's written. He wrote one with Rosemary Ellen Guiley called The Road to Strange, Travel Tales of Paranormal and Beyond. Also UFOs, Aliens, and High Strangeness, and a bunch of other books that relate to paranormal topics.
Well, any books that have Rosemary Ellen Guiley as part of the author on it have to be great. She's written so many phenomenal books. I have tons of them here, all signed by her. She's such a wonderful person.
Yeah, she's a great person, been on the program before, and a real treat to have anything that she's been involved with talked about on the program.
So a lot to come. The phone number tonight, like every night, is 844-687-7669. Again, toll free at 844-687-7669. We're going to take a quick break. Get our guest, Jeremy FInley, on the line. You listen to Jason and JV, Beyond Reality Radio. We'll be back after this.
Loving you isn't the right thing to do. How can I ever change things that I feel? If I could, maybe I'd give you my word. How can I, when you won't take it from me? You can go your own way. Go.
100.9 FM, 101.9 FM. 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 101.9 FM.
Welcome back to the program. It's Beyond Reality Radio with Jason and JV. Our guest tonight is Jeremy FInley. By the way, you should check out his website. It's jeremyfinley.com. You can also get more information about his new book called The Darkest Time of Night. It's his first novel. Jeremy is an investigative reporter, an author, and a journalist, and we're pleased to have him on the program. Jeremy, welcome to Beyond Reality Radio.
Jason and JV, it is great to be here. I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you so much, guys, for having me on.
Oh, thanks for coming on. We've been looking forward to this.
That's okay. Let's start with the book just for a minute here. The Darkest Time of Night. It's your first novel.
It's my first novel. I've been a working journalist since I was 17 years old, and I'm out now with my first work of fiction. And I'll tell you, it's been the dream of a lifetime to really get to this point, to have this book out, and I've really been able to explore my interest in the paranormal and the supernatural with my love of thrillers, and I put all this together with this book, and it's just been great to see how well it's been received, and to be on shows like this. It's been great.
Now, that path from a reporter to a novelist, and we're going to talk more about the book in a little bit, but that path going from being a reporter to a novelist, that's not an uncommon path. Is there a calling or something when you either set out to be a novelist that you kind of go through that reporter path, or is it once you become a reporter, you yearn to write something that you can put your own name on as your original idea?
You have tapped into, I think, what every reporter suffers through, which is, I think every reporter thinks, "Oh, I've got a book in me." It's just something that is inside us. I think when we do write stories on a deadline, on a day-to-day basis, and you encounter people from all walks of life, you're always thinking, "Oh, I've got a novel in me." In my case, I originally had always wanted to be a novelist. That was what I always wanted to do. But I also fell in love with journalism and chased that, and continue to chase that career, and really love that work in doing investigative reporting. And I think that I just got to a point where I was like, okay, I've always wanted to do this. This has been the dream since I literally was in the 5th grade, wanted to be a novelist, and decided, okay, I'm at that point where I need to start taking this serious. And it's a long path. Anybody that writes a novel will tell you it is a long and grueling process just to get it done, and then to get it published, and to go through all of those steps. It's a long road. But I think to answer your question, I think just most journalists will kind of yearn to be able to do that long form storytelling, whether it's nonfiction or fiction.
Well, and I agree with you. It's a long path. It really is. And I've written 6 books, and it's one of those things where a lot of times the hardest thing is to put down the thoughts, and it's probably easier for you as a journalist. I'm a TV guy, but it's one of those things to take what you're thinking and put it into words, and that always seems to be one of the hardest things.
It is, and if you're like the rest of us, which are just huge fans of the greats in literature, you see how well they do it, and you think, okay, I'm going to study them. I'm going to study the greats. I'm going to really understand how a great story is told. And how you are as a reader, and how we all are as readers, is you get into a great novel and you just love it, and then sometimes something goes wrong, and you get frustrated, and you think, well, what just happened? This book that I love so much, why has it gone so wildly off the rails? And so it was really important for me to study the greats, to see how they really told a great story, and try to leave my own imprint by using their success and their methodology. So I think that's a big part of it.
Jeremy, I'll bite. Who are the greats?
Who are the greats? Well, I think we all know the greats of literature, so we'll leave those behind, because that is, I think we've all gone through the high school English and college English courses, and we know that. But when I say the greats, I'm talking strictly from a thriller standpoint, because that's what I write, and I specifically write paranormal and speculative thrillers. So, of course, you always have to bow down to Stephen King, and all of us that are huge Stephen King fans look at him, and when we say, my God, look at what he's done in his career, but you also have to look at the in my personal favorites. You look at Robert McMahon, and I think I'm saying his last name right. That's terrible. I'm such a huge fan of his books and like A Boy's Life and all of those. There's also a great novelist out by the name of Michael Corita, and he writes speculative fiction as well as other thrillers. You've got Jennifer McMahon, and I think that I've combined their two last names. She's a great thriller writer that writes in the speculative genre. So I think I know for me, I really looked to them, and I said, okay, these are people that are writing great thrillers, and they're making this combination with the otherworldly aspect and the supernatural and the speculative. And to me, that is just, I actually wrote a column about this for the website Criminal Element about a week or so ago, just talking about how I think the speculative thriller is just such a great thing for the summer, because, a summer paperback is just one of the greatest things you can do, taking yourself to the beach with that. But when you take a Stephen King with you, or one of those other authors that I had mentioned, and you're on the road of a great thriller, and then you're also veers wildly into an otherworldly aspect of it, I don't know. For me, I just think that's a great summer read. It's a great way to enjoy any type of vacation you're on.
Well, the funny thing is, I've been one of those people, been sitting there reading a Stephen King book, and you're so into the book that somebody starts somebody's talking to you or saying something to you, and you don't even hear it. You totally phase the world out around you because you're trying to figure out what's going to happen next.
And we live in some troubled times, in a lot of different ways, and I think that is why there is still such a yearning for great writing of all genres. But I think especially for thrillers, you see that people are wanting something to help them escape in a healthy way, and I think that's what I do as a reader too. I sit down and I want to pick up those books that really just take me away. I'm reading a Brad Thor thriller right now. And he's such a great thriller writer, and you read his stuff, and it just transports you completely away. And I also, at the same time, am rereading one of the F. Paul Wilson greats, which is The Keep, and he's fantastic as well. And you just read these books, and anybody that's listening to this now knows it. Once you going back to Stephen King, he's just got that magic, guys. He just can sit down there and tell you this story, and you are hooked. And that's the kind of novelist I want to be. I want you to say, okay, here's a Jeremy Finley novel. Man, I love these things because they really tell me a great story, and they let me kind of jump out of the troubles of the day. I think that's kind of a primary mission for the novelists of this time.
We have about 30 seconds before we have to jump into break here, and you've mentioned Stephen King several times, and I just have to wonder, as somebody who has written a novel, how does somebody like Stephen King write so prolifically, and almost every one of those works is a landmark work that's just a phenomenal read, and they're not small generally. They're very, very thick reads.
Right, you're not talking about a 200-pager or a novella or anything. I think in just studying his stories and what he does, this is beyond just being able to have a gift. This is something that I think, has to do. When I've read interviews with him, this is what he has to do it well, and I think he is just so fine-tuned into what his readers want to read that he knows these compelling stories, and he just takes it off and run. I think it's literally something he has to do, and thank God he does.
Yeah, thank God he does, because he's given us some real treats, that's for sure.
Well, our guest is Jeremy Finley, author of The Darkest Time of Night. We're going to get into that book and a lot more when we come back. You're listening to Jason and JV, Beyond Reality Radio. We'll be back after this.
above me. Look my way, never love me. Rain keeps falling down, down, down. Will you recognize me? Call my name or walk on by. Rain keeps falling down.
Our guest tonight is Jeremy Finley. He's an author, a journalist, and investigative reporter. His book is called The Darkest Time of Night. His website is jeremyfinley.com. We're going to bring him back in just a moment. I just want to mention something quickly because we're having storms go through here, and whenever the weather is this humid, this hot in the Northeast, we get these bands of storms coming through. And on Saturday, in fact, one of those bands of storms came through, and a good friend of both of ours, Jay, Scott, Scott from Cooperstown, he was driving actually to meet me, to go to a gig with me, and as he was driving, a very, very large tree fell on his car with a power line. And he made the mistake of getting out of the car at the time, which fortunately he got a shock, but he didn't get killed or injured seriously. But NICE, the power company, when they arrived, said you should not have gotten out of the car. There was a 90% chance you would have gotten electrocuted. You just happened to be in that 10% where you got out okay. So I just want to mention that because if anybody finds themselves in that situation, unless the car is on fire, stay in the vehicle until the power company shows up.
Yeah. There was just a case recently of a mother and her two children that were stuck in the car, and they ended up having to get them out. But I mean, it's crazy too because these storms come through and there are these weird bursts, especially here on the East Coast where you've got the water. Depending on the water temperature, it just amplifies the power of it. And all of a sudden, we were at the lake house last week, and it was beautiful out, and all of a sudden, we were getting winds of like 50 miles an hour, blowing the umbrellas all over and everything else, and it was crazy. You never know.
Yeah, they whip up out of nowhere. But anyway, our guest tonight is Jeremy Finley. He's an investigative reporter, journalist turned author, and he's done a lot of great work. And Jeremy, how long have you been a reporter / investigative journalist? When did you get started in that?
So I actually started when I was 17 years old, started working at my college newspaper, but my college newspaper had a pretty large circulation, and it was a daily newspaper. So I started working actually then covering stories when I was 17. But I moved into doing investigations full-time about 12 years ago, and it's been truly what I've wanted to do my entire career is to move into that world of holding the powerful accountable and investigating all kinds of taxpayer waste and criminal activities and things like that. So it's been for about the last 12 years that I've done that, and truly I think I found the most important work that journalism is about, and we all know this, the importance of true investigative reporting. So I'm thrilled to be able to do that on a day-to-day basis.
Well, I have to say that I'm in agreement with that particular statement, and I think there's far too little of it in the media these days. A lot of the media just seems to be an echo chamber for what other media is saying, or maybe what's coming out of our leaders and politicians' mouths. Do you think the state of media is struggling with that particular concept, with their watchdog role?
It's interesting you should say that because there's so many of us that truly feel like, as embattled as the news industry is, and I see it every day, everywhere that I go, I think that we will look back on this time in history and see that this is a golden age of journalism, because I think that what we're doing here is we are fighting the stigma day to day of the fake news mantra. And this is a time where journalists have to prove their strength, and they have to prove just how tough they're going to be, because the criticism's coming from all sides. This isn't just one. Of course, it's easy to look on the national level and see, who's criticizing journalists and all of that, but it's trickling down. It's coming down to local governments. I get it. where someone doesn't like the facts that I've reported and they'll call it fake news just because they don't agree with it. But I think that it is something that the news industry has to grapple with. It is something that we have to come to some kind of understanding and realize with our readers and our viewers and our listeners that there's something that they're angry about. And if journalists don't realize that and really start listening to the people that we're reporting on, we're going to be in some trouble. But, the whole point of investigative journalism is, we're not out to make friends. We're not out to be the most popular kids in school. We are literally out to challenge authority. We are out to shine a light in the dark. That is what we do. And if you can make peace with that, if you can understand that this is going to be your role is to really ruffle feathers, then it's what I consider to be a pretty noble profession.
Well, especially investigative journalism. I mean, that's a whole other aspect of the media these days, and the problem is the media used to report the facts, but now it's more that they report what suits their agenda. But when it comes down to investigative media journalism, it's totally different because they're really digging in. They're going in and trying to find the accurate information, whether you like it or not.
Sure, and it's and you're absolutely right in the sense of, it is what when you look at these reporters and you think of what they've exposed this year, in cases like Harvey Weinstein and tackling these issues that people for so long have been, it's been an open secret, and they tackle them, and the change they've brought about is just incredible. I will say that I think, and it's funny, I was just getting this criticism today on my own Facebook page where I had posted, I was in New York a couple days ago, and the New York Times has this mantra that is out on the front of a building, and it just talks about that the truth is uncomfortable and the truth is difficult at times. And I posted it, and I got all of these friends that are both leaning left and then leaning right, and it was all this criticism, and there's this real anger towards the people believing that the news departments have this agenda. Now, you can debate this as long as you want to. I just know that I know journalists across the world and across the country, and literally these men and women wake up every day and they just want to tell the truth. And yes, they're going to challenge the powerful. They're going to challenge the president. They're going to challenge everything, and it's not going to make them popular. But journalists don't get into this line of work to sit there and try to appease someone. It's part of, even in my own fiction writing, that I want to challenge people, and it's the stuff that you guys do on a nightly basis, and with your other programs, you are challenging what people believe, and it's not easy and it's not popular, but this is what we do. And if you can do it, and you can really influence people or show them something else that they may not absolutely believe in, then I think that's the world that we have to be in, and I think it's important as part of our discourse that we do this.
Jeremy, I think I know the answer to this question, but I want to hear your answer to it. What's the difference between a reporter or journalist and an investigative reporter?
So, you like to think that all reporters are investigative reporters, all good reporters are investigative reporters, but the truth of the matter is investigative journalists have a little bit more time to dig in. So, a daily general assignment reporter that you read in the paper or online or see on the nightly news, they're turning a story every day. Every single day they're covering something. They're covering the president, or they're covering the shooting in a neighborhood or a city council meeting. Investigative journalists, like myself, we still turn several stories a week, but we're working on much larger projects. And I know for myself, running a fairly large investigative unit here at the NBC station in Nashville, we do surveillance operations, and we do undercover work, and we fight for open records, and we have all these long-form projects that we work on. And truly what you've got to expect from a day-to-day reporter is they're going to report the facts. They're going to report what this person said and what that person said. Investigative journalists will then delve in deeper and say, okay, this is what the people say, but we actually dug up the records, and here's the proof. Oh, and here's the hidden camera video we have that shows the proof. And here's this that we've uncovered. And it takes time, and it takes resources, but to me, it's the most important thing that journalism is about, is bringing the proof to the people. That is truly what this is about, and I think that it's vital that people understand when they see an in-depth investigative report, it shows you that a journalist has cared enough to really bring you the proof. So I think that, if you have local television stations or radio stations or anything that has investigative units, I think that's a true sign that they're in it for all the right reasons.
A lot of us, and I don't know if this is changing with the generational change, but a lot of us look at the Watergate coverage and breaking of that story as kind of the holy grail of investigative reporting. Do you, as an investigative reporter, hold that particular example up to that level?
Oh, well, I'll tell you, when I was growing up, my parents read the newspaper, which is why I wanted to be a newspaper reporter at the beginning, and they really didn't watch that much television except for 60 Minutes. So my whole exposure to this was to see, oh my gosh, look at this incredible news operation that is on every Sunday night that has this. But yes, I mean, Watergate made journalism romantic for so many of us because it was these two guys that were just embattled, and they were just beat up left and right, and criticized by the president, and just tore up in Washington, and they literally changed Washington forever. But I think we're seeing much more of that. If you see the women that did the stories, the female reporters who did the stories on Harvey Weinstein, and saw the risks they took, and you think of Ronan Farrow and everything he went through to expose it. That's why I kind of think in a lot of ways we're seeing this golden age of journalists really challenging the powerful and taking them down one by one. And so I think Watergate set the tone. Like it or not, if you go back and look at Watergate, it was very much the president constantly criticizing the Washington Post, constantly, and that was his methodology. Now, what we're seeing in our own presidential coverage right now is a million different scandals that everybody's head's spinning about. So history will show us what ultimately will prove to be the major scandals of our time. But I think all you have to do is look at these powerful men all over the world that literally have been brought down because of the work of journalists. So, I feel strongly about my colleagues across the nation and across the world that are really trying to do this good work.
We're talking with Jeremy FInley. He's an author, a journalist, an investigative reporter. His book is called The Darkest Time of Night. You can find it on Amazon. You can also find it on his website, jeremyfinley.com.
A lot more to come. You're listening to Jason and JV Beyond Reality Radio. We'll be back after this.
To relate to, save the seed.
Now, this song was, I think, popular in like 78, which is a few years. Maybe it was a little earlier than that. I don't remember, but it was a little late after the Watergate scandal. So as we went into break, we were talking about Watergate with our guest, Jeremy Finley, who's an investigative reporter. He's also the author of a book called The Darkest Time of Night. His website is jeremyfinley.com. We're going to be talking a lot more about the book in the second hour. Right now, we're talking about basically what the state of the media has been recently. We get all sorts of media self-reporting and criticism coming from both government circles and other media circles and social media. And Jeremy, as somebody who's kind of, you got your start prior to the social media revolution, but you've certainly seen the social media revolution. What's that doing to the state of our news industry?
It's really interesting that you brought that up. And guys, I so appreciate you talking about this. I think it's important that we have these conversations about how people feel about journalism and the state of the news media. So I appreciate this conversation that we're having. I think the social media revolution has completely changed journalism for good and bad. You will see this constant flow of information. And I think that's the thing that we really have to step back and talk about, which is where we're getting our information. And I think Facebook has changed this so much because people will take information that they see on Facebook or they see somewhere and they will put it out as truth. And it will be shared and I think that's destructive to a sense, because when you're sharing information without truly understanding where it's coming from and it's passed off as news, then I think that gets a little dangerous. So I always encourage people. I say, listen, if you're reading something on Facebook, look and see who posted it. Look and see which news organization put it out. Do you consider them to be biased? Do you consider them to have really be someone that does their homework? Are they even a news agency at all? And so I think for that sense, we have to kind of really take a step back and be much more critical viewers and readers and listeners and identify these sources of news, where they're coming from. I think Facebook is doing a better job at that now because of the criticism that they have faced. But, we see it on Twitter. We see it on our aunts and uncles and parents' Facebook pages and friends' Facebook pages. And I just think it's important that we become as critical as we can about the sources of information of where we're getting them, and really leaning on news organizations to say, okay, I'm relying on you to bring me this information, to bring me this on an unbiased source. Now, here's the thing. People say this all the time. Do reporters have biases? Absolutely. They're human beings. Should it make its way into their reporting? Absolutely not. Never, never, never. But that doesn't mean they don't have it. A good reporter just hides that and doesn't let it influence his or her reporting. Now, let's not sugarcoat things. We all know that there are news outlets that lean left and lean right. There's a reason that their corporate ownership does this, and I think we as savvy people have to sit there and say, okay, well, I get that, so I'm going to need to find the news organizations that challenge the way I think, bring me other sides of a story that I don't necessarily agree with. I think one of the most dangerous things that any of us can do is follow a news organization that tells us what we want to hear. And that's when I think that you should know as a listener or a reader, I only watch the news programs that tell me what I agree with. I think that's dangerous. I think that is not what news publications and websites should be about. And please understand the difference between a commentator and a journalist, because the men and women that you see on the cable shows at night, oftentimes they have journalists acting as their producers, but these people are commentators. When you see their programs on, realize they're sharing their opinion, and there's a huge difference between that and the men and women who are on the ground every day, fighting to get information and delivering their stories. So again, being critical listeners, viewers, readers is vital in this age.
Now, I just got to, you just maybe said something here I'm not sure I understand. Did you say that if it's on the internet, it's not necessarily true?
What?
I know, isn't that amazing? It's a shockwave. It's a shockwave. But it's funny. You still see this. I see it every day on my Facebook page. I am blessed to have friends and followers that are on all ends of the political spectrum, and they will share things. And I just want to say to them, look, I know you're a smart person, but what you're sharing is not accurate. It's not true. And sometimes I say that, and I try to avoid online and social media wars with people, but I do think it's incredibly vital for people to realize, hey, I'm a smart person. I'm going to challenge what I'm reading here and really look and see the source of where this is coming from.
And I think that's important. And most of us, I've even fallen for fake news sometimes when it pops up, and because it pops up in the craziest places.
Yeah, but the funny thing about that is it's usually about you, and you believe it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know. I believe the stories. I mean, yeah, jeez. But anyways, so, all right. So we got a lot more to come, and we're really going to start getting into this book, The Darkest Time of Night, with author Jeremy Finley when we come back after this. The phone number is 844-687-7669, toll free at 844-687-7669. You're listening to Jason JV, Beyond Reality Radio. We'll be back after this.
Josie's on a vacation far away. Come around and talk it over. So many things that I wanna say. I like my girls a little bit older. I just wanna use your love tonight. I don't wanna lose your love tonight.
paranormal that cannot be explained by scientific methods.
Told of a creature that was 6.5 to 7 feet tall.
The CIA ran secret mind control experiments.
It's a tale of a creature that's been seen by many, but believed by few.
And experts say there have been reported sightings of paranormal activity.
And there was this creature, and it ran down this hill.
They say something was flying over their house, and they have no idea what it was.
How the world's most powerful individuals are actually shape-shifting reptilians.
My scariest ghost hunting experience.
Jason and JV.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. Can't handle the truth. Who would it
Beyond reality. Radio.
It's Monday on the West, Tuesday on the East. Many of you are stuck somewhere in between. Welcome to Beyond Reality Radio with myself, Jason Hawes, and the always awesome JV Johnson.
We have a great guest tonight. We're going to bring him back in just a few minutes. Jeremy Finley, who is an author and investigative reporter. He's got a book out called The Darkest Time of Night, which we're going to speak about as well. But I wanted to mention this. There's a church in Hobbs, New Mexico, which is being investigated by scientists and the Roman Catholic Church for the claims of a miracle. Apparently, there's a statue of the Virgin Mary there that has been crying. And not only is it crying, but they tested the substance that's coming from her eyes because it was a little bit more viscous than water. And it's been determined to be olive oil.
Olive oil? Really?
So the Virgin Mary in Hobbs, New Mexico, in the Lady of Guadalupe Church, Catholic Church, is crying olive oil. The scientists have looked at the statue. They've actually looked at the interior because it's a hollow statue. There is no sign of any kind of hoaxing or tampering, but they're baffled as to why this would be olive oil. Now, I'm assuming if they let some of the wine that they keep for communion sit a little while, it'll turn into vinegar. They could have themselves a nice little salad dressing there.
Well, that's actually not a bad idea. See, you're a problem solver. Yes. You really are.
But they're investigating. The church is very interested in it. The scientists are very interested in this, and they haven't made any determination yet. But at this point, it looks like it could be something interesting.
Jeez, well, that's amazing. I do want to give a shout out. I did first hour, and I know some of you might have just tuned in late. My co-star from Ghost Hunters, Grant Wilson, his mother actually passed away today, and I just want to give a shout out to Grant and his entire family. Much love from all of us over here, and your family's in our prayers.
Yeah, and same goes for me. Thoughts and prayers with you, Grant, and your family, of course.
All right.
Go ahead.
I
was just going to say, we've got some great stuff coming up this week as well. In addition to tonight's program, tomorrow we've got Bernie Taylor, who's a naturalist and a thought leader on the program, talking about alternative thought circles that are a product of the distant past and things that we may have inherited culturally from Atlantis, from aliens, and other sources that would be considered paranormal.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
All right. And Wednesday, we got Jennifer Longmore, soul purpose coach. We're going to be talking past life regression and how past life can impact your ability to make money today. So make sure you tune in.
I want to know how that works.
We must have done something really wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I did in my past life because I've never had visions or regressions, so I'm not really sure. But I'm hoping it was something that was very lucrative.
Well,
and
we had that one past life person on
that's
here
right.
who was telling us that
you and I were cousins.
And I married.
And we were married.
No, were we married together, or which would really be strange.
The whole thing was weird. I remember from the Civil War or something.
Yes, some strange stuff.
I don't remember who that guest was, but I do remember the conversation.
And I just know that we're not having her back.
Yeah. Let's bring our guest, Jeremy Finley, into the discussion. Jeremy, I want to touch on one thing that we were chatting about just before the break. We're talking about fake news and social media and all that. And one of the things, and I want to get your take on this as a reporter, but one of the things that is being talked about more and more are these laws that would be designed to address fake news issues. And the thought of that is a bit concerning from somebody who is a First Amendment advocate. I'm curious as to what your opinion would be on, and maybe your profession's opinion would be on making laws that would actually control the speech of others on things like Facebook.
Anything like that just frankly makes me a bit nervous. I think that we have to keep the idea that we've got to keep this truth and the reality of the freedom of expression open and unregulated. Now, what people don't understand is, yes, you have a right to your freedom of expression. You don't have a right, though, to freedom of ramifications for expressing that freedom of expression. I think that we have to understand that we are in this world where we're looking to punish and we are looking to do something destructive towards people or things that we don't like. Now, we have laws in place, obviously, to do these things if these actions become criminal. I just think that regulating the news industry as any kind of way is a bad thing. I think that's moving us in a direction that is unnecessary, and I think that it's just a bad idea that if we had any type of regulation when it comes to any type of regulation on the news industry, just seems to give my skin to crawl a bit, to be honest with you.
It's an ugly specter, to use a paranormal reference, for sure. Let's talk about some of the work you've done as an investigative reporter. You were instrumental in exposing Toyota's problems, which I think that case was referred to as the unintended acceleration problem. Tell us what happened there.
Sure. It obviously years and years ago, I literally got a call from a gentleman who lives in Middle Tennessee, and he said, "Listen, you need to know that my truck took off on its own, and it was a Toyota Tacoma, and he said it literally operated on its own. I could not get it to stop, and it had a terrible accident." And this was, I have to think about how many years ago this was, at least a decade ago, I think. And I then started doing research across the country and found other people that were driving Toyota Tacoma pickup trucks that were all expressing this same concern, that their trucks were literally taking off on their own. So we started airing the investigations then into these Toyota Tacoma pickup trucks. And, of course, at the time, Toyota was very much, saying that this wasn't true, that these were safe vehicles. And I think it wasn't less than 2 years later that they began the recalls, and the unintended acceleration became a very real phenomenon that was happening. And it was one of the and so after after that happened, Congress began to hold hearings, and they showed discussed our stories in their hearings to say, look, this was exposed 2 years before. Why did it take so long to come to the public's attention on a national level? So that was one of those stories that literally started from a viewer just calling and saying something's not right with these trucks, and ended up being one of, if not the biggest recall in history for automobiles.
When you do that kind of work, there must be an amazing gratification that comes out at the end when you realize that you've actually probably saved lives.
It's when that happens, and you're right, it is incredibly gratifying, but journalists swim upstream every day. It is one fight after another for information, to get information. So, we take our wins when we can get them, but that is exactly why we do this. This is exactly why Woodward and Bernstein did what they did, and what, again, I keep talking about these courageous women that have exposed Harvey Weinstein and what he did, and Ronan Farrow. They do this because they're like, something is wrong, and something is either dangerous or something is corrupt, and it needs to be exposed. And this is why you do it. You do it so you can have some kind of positive impact on people and try to keep them safe. And, that ranges from government to business, consumer reporting. It's why it's so vital, and it's why, we get up and do this every day.
When you get to, investigate, I guess would be the word, as an investigative reporter, politicians, is there a certain level of satisfaction when you can expose something that betrays the public trust versus maybe more of a corporate type reveal?
Well, I'll tell you, I discussed this with another great colleague of mine here on our investigative unit, and we literally this year did a series of stories that within 2 months had a judge with federal criminal charges, and that judge is now in federal prison. It happened that fast because of the stories that we did, and it never feels good. And I know that may sound a little bit strange for someone to say, oh, wait a second, you exposed the corrupt behaviors of this judge. It doesn't feel good to put that information out and then to see people be punished for it. What feels good is that hopefully it restores a bit of faith that people have in journalism, which is what feels good, is when people come up and say, hey, I saw you did this, or would you help me with something, or I think this is corrupt. It's kind of a chain reaction that we get. I've been doing a series of stories into a government agency that this year, that after we did our stories, there 2 criminal charges were, criminal investigations were launched, and the executive director of this government agency was terminated. None of that feels good. What feels good is when people see those stories and they call you and they say, hey, I've got something else you need to look into because I think this is a problem too. It kind of restores your faith in humanity a little bit when you see people brave enough to step forward to say, listen, this needs to be exposed. But in terms of feeling good, that's the only part that feels good. Seeing people fall from power, it's not, you never get a sense of satisfaction out of that. It's just, you still, or at the end of the day, know that, someone has fallen, and it, is not a great feeling. But again, the great feeling is knowing that the public feels good about the kind of work you're doing.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it also opens up the point where somebody falls from a place of power, but they abused that power and shouldn't have had it in the first place. So.
Yeah, it's a true point, and it's you can look at it either way. You can look at it and say, look, you had this coming, pal. When you ascend to this position of power and then you abuse it, what do you think is going to happen? But again, what I think that just keeps me going every day is when I get into work and I see the voicemails on my phone or emails or text tips that I've got from people saying, look, I really want to expose this. I want people to know that what's happening is wrong, and that feels good.
Let's turn the conversation to the expose that you did, where you caught a politician in lounging around in a bathrobe when they said they were actually supposed to be at a meeting. What was that about?
So this was it's become one of the great Nashville folklore kind of stories, is that this was a relatively highly paid criminal court clerk, and he was notorious for not being in the office. And so the producer I was working with at the time did exceptional work in following him, doing undercover surveillance of him to show how often he wasn't in the office. Well, one day we knew he wasn't in the office. We knew where he lived. It was in the middle of the workday, and we knew he was home. And so I called him and I said, listen, I need to talk to you about, all of this, stories that we've been working on. And he said, oh, well, I'm in a meeting right now. And I said, oh, so you're in a meeting? And he said, yeah. And so then we got off the phone, and not long after, he comes walking out of his house in his bathrobe, going to the mailbox. And so then we, of course, went to the door a few minutes later, and he answered the door. And I said, wait a second, you told me you were in a meeting in the office. And he obviously was quite surprised, and he later was not reelected to office. But it was one of those classic kind of, politician, person on the taxpayer dime, saying that they were in the office. And we've done this time and time again with elected officials here in Nashville, and I've seen it done across the country, where you literally can catch them in the act. And when you do that, it's really the most effective types of stories that we can do, because the proof is there and everybody sees it, and it shows them that we're watching. And I think that's important for politicians to know, is that journalists are always watching.
Well, that's a great point, because I think many of them get comfortable, they get away with it for a little while, and they assume no one is watching. So they all someone else to do is kind of start paying attention. You can catch a lot of the stuff. We have to take a break here, and we'll be back with our guest, Jeremy FInley. We're talking to him about his work as an investigative reporter and his book. It's called The Darkest Time of Night.
All right, a lot more to come. You listen to Jason JV, Beyond Reality Radio. We'll be back after this.
Finally I figured out, but it took a long, long time. Now there's a turnabout, maybe cause I'm a try. seen it all, 'cause it's been a long, long time. Oh, but then we'll trip and fall, wondering if I'm blind. There's been time I'm so confused.
We're talking with Jeremy Finley, author, journalist, investigative reporter. His book is called The Darkest Time of Night. His website is jeremyfinley.com. Check out both of those things. And Jeremy, we have just a couple of minutes here. It's a short segment for us before we go to break. And when we come back from the break, we're going to get into the details of your novel, The Darkest Time of Night, because it's been referred to as something that would really appeal to X-Files fans, which, of course, Jason and I are both fans of the X-Files, and so is just about everybody that listens to this radio program. So it sounds right up our alley.
Yeah, it was one of the great reviews, and I was so thrilled to get it as being a huge fan of the show myself. And I remember that first review coming in and comparing it to the X-Files and Stranger Things, and that to me was just about as good as it gets because I'm such a huge fan of both of those shows and really what they've just done for our entire culture. So I'm excited to talk to you guys more about that as well.
So I have to say, again, because it's a short segment here, you're a Nashville reporter in the Nashville area. I've been to Nashville a few times. Beautiful, beautiful city, a fast-growing city. Do you find that Nashville reporting it varies any from any other part of the country? Is there something unique about it?
You know, I will say this. What Nashville has, which I'm very proud of, is that we have these great investigative units. So there's great investigative work that is being done here on all levels, from our NPR stations to our television stations to our newspapers, our weekly magazines. So it's really, really strong for investigative reporting. I think that, it is, it's like a lot of progressive but also very southern cities where it still very much feels like it's a small town where you know all of the players, but it is in this large growing city that has an influx of people from New York and Los Angeles. We have 100 people moving here a day. So the culture itself is extremely changing. So it's been really interesting to come here in 2003 and find it kind of to be this sleepy little southern town to be what it is today. So the influx that we have is really changing the city. And, but at the same time, it's just a great, fun place to live. And so it's an exciting time to be in the city.
Well, especially seeing we got a couple of hundred people leaving here a day in Rhode Island.
In New York,
we're out of here.
Upstate New York is the same way.
All right, so there is a lot more to come. If you haven't yet, head over to facebook.com/Beyond Reality Radio, like the Facebook page. Then head to BeyondRealityRadio.com. You can find all the stations we air on across the country, get the free smartphone apps, or listen right from the website any night we're live. We're going to take a quick break. A lot more to come. You listen to Jason and JV, Beyond Reality Radio. We'll be back after this.
I'm sailing away, set an open course for the virgin sea, 'cause I've got to be free to face life. Me. On board, I'm the captain, so climb aboard. We'll search for tomorrow on every shore, and I'll try, oh Lord, I'll try to carry on.
Welcome back to Beyond Reality Radio. Jason and JV, our guest tonight, Jeremy Finley, author, journalist, investigative reporter. His book is called The Darkest Time of Night. Jeremy, when you decided to write a novel, what guided you as to what the topic was going to be?
You know, the idea came to me from all places from my mother-in-law. She's this phenomenally great, kind, quiet, unassuming woman, and we were in the kitchen of their house one day, and she was telling the story of what she did while my father-in-law was in law school, and she was in her very early 20s and working this job, and she took a job in an astronomy department at a university, at Northwestern University, and she said among the professors who she worked for was a professor who did UFO research, and she started telling us these stories of all these amazing and bizarre and troubling messages that she would take from him from all over the world, of people talking about abductions and sightings of spacecrafts and things like that, and she said that this professor would go on to be an extra in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, because if you may recall, they used a lot of actual professors who studied this as extras in that movie. And so when she was done telling this story, and I picked my jaw off the floor, I went to bed that night, and I thought, my God, this is a phenomenal story. But obviously, I wanted to keep a big separation from the truth from fiction. So I really didn't ask her much more about what she had done, and I took that story and turned it into the book that would become The Darkest Time of Night.
When somebody compares it to something like Close Encounters, and I think somebody said in one of their comments about the book that this was the Close Encounters for the new generation, you must get a heck of a lot of satisfaction.
I will tell you that it was one of the great reviews that I had gotten. It was when another great New York Times best-selling author reviewed the book and she called it a Close Encounters for the modern age. That's the best kind of praise that you can get. Again, any references to another writer had said that if you love the X-Files and you love Stranger Things, this is a book that you'll enjoy, because those are the stories that I love, and those are the movies and the books and the TV shows that I love. I think these series really change the game for all of us that are interested in the paranormal and speculative fiction and all of this. So to have those comparisons is about as good as it gets.
Give us a little bit of an outline of what this story tells us or talks about, or what the plot is, without giving anything away. No spoilers here.
Sure. So it tells the story of the disappearance of a U.S. Senator's grandson, is how it begins. And the boy goes missing in the woods behind his grandparents' home. The only witness to the disappearance is the boy's older brother, who will only say it once, that the lights took him, and then will never speak again about what he saw. So, of course, the National Guard and the FBI come in. It comes to find out that the grandfather has high political aspirations. He's a U.S. Senator, but he has even higher aspirations. So there are many theories as to what happened to this boy. But ultimately, the boy's grandmother begins to remember some of what she used to research when she was had a certain job in the 1960s, and begins this quest to try and find out what happened to her grandson, but in doing so will force her to return to the research that she used to do, that she has concealed from her family, because exposing what she knows, exposing what she did, could very much damage her husband's political career. So that's how the novel begins.
Oh, definitely a catch-22 there, right?
Well, I hope you guys heard it, and I hope that your listeners heard it and might want to find out more.
Again, you go to the website, jeremyfinley.com, or go to Amazon. The book is available in both places. I think on the website, Jeremy, it probably links right to Amazon or something, doesn't it?
It sure does. It has all the places that you can buy. You can also see all of the reviews, and we've been thrilled to see everyone from NPR to the New York Post to People Magazine all give great reviews. People and the New York Post have called it one of the best books of the summer. And then the other reviews, so you can look and see what other some really top-notch reviewers have been great to give us some great feedback. We've also got some videos on there that you can watch, the book trailer that we put together for the book, and some of the other television appearances, some other television coverage of the book. So there's a lot on there to enjoy, I hope.
Jeremy, the state of publishing these days, things have changed so much. The digital age has changed everything. I don't think there's an industry that hasn't been touched. And writers and publishers, it's actually opened doors because people can self-publish. However, it's also made book sales a little bit challenged at times, although it's being replaced a little bit by electronic readers. But what do you see the industry of the publishing world?
You know, what's been fascinating to see is the rise of the audiobook and how that has become such a huge part of sales. And I'm thrilled to say that The Darkest Time of Night has a great audiobook that has a great performance by a really talented actress who tells the story. And people are really getting into this because of all the commutes that we all have and the traveling we have to do. And listening to these books is become this real phenomenon. So you're absolutely right. It's a challenge. It is a huge challenge. It's a crowded marketplace. But they see that this audiobook has become a big deal. So you're going to see a lot more of this. You're going to see on Audible and being able to download it. But I think that we're also, again, in this age where we need this escapism and a healthy escapism. And I think reading books, whether you're reading it on a Kindle or you prefer the hardback or the paperback, that's never going to go away. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be fluctuating. But I think that it's never actually going to go away. So I'm thrilled to be publishing my first novel in this era. And luckily, I've had a team of exceptional editors at St. Martin's Press out of New York that have just done a phenomenal job helping me tell the story. And I'm thrilled to also say that the sequel to The Darkest Time of Night will come out next year. So if you get in on it now and enjoy what you've read, there's much more to the story coming. And so we're working on that right now.
Well, and to get a book published these days, it's really tough. And Jimmy made a good point there. Like I was saying earlier, I've written books as well, and I've had 6 out there. But the fact of the matter is, I was lucky enough that I had a TV show that helped fuel the book. So,
Sure.
Of course, Simon & Schuster and all those companies sign on because they want to see it. But for a small-time author who's just starting off, what do you recommend for them to do to try to get themselves noticed?
I talked to this, especially at this conference in New York that I was just at. It was for a writers' conference, and I've talked about this with, aspiring writers, it seems to be so basic to say perseverance is everything, but it is everything. It literally is. We talked earlier in the last hour about studying the greats, which is what I did when I set out to write a thriller. So the advice that I have is do your homework. Read the books in your genre so you know what the greats are doing and blatantly steal their methods. Don't feel bad at all about saying, hey, you don't want to steal their ideas, obviously, but look how they craft their stories. And then once you really get a good understanding of that, it's all perseverance. You write that story, you write it over and over and over and over again. You have it edited over and over again by friends, and then you never give up. I had an incredibly long process of getting to publish, but the mindset that I had was, just as I have as a reporter, I was not taking no for an answer. And finally it got to the point, I'll be 45 this fall, 44 when this book came out. I've wanted to be a novelist since I was in the 5th grade, so it just goes to show, if you don't quit, it will happen for you if you really work on your craft and study the greats. I think that's the key.
Great advice.
You mentioned St. Martin's Press, and I don't usually do this on air, but do you know a person by the name of Peter Wolverton?
I know Peter Wolverton very well. He's my editor, and he's, well, I think one of the best in the biz.
He's a high school, one of my best friends from high school. So I didn't know that going into this discussion. That's pretty cool.
Well, that is amazing, and people should know that if you see a Peter Wolverton book, you know you are getting some great stuff there. It's so funny that you say that. I literally just had lunch with him a couple days ago, and he's just one of the funniest and sharpest and greatest guys. What was supposed to be an hour lunch ended up being a 3-hour lunch because he's just the best. So well, I'm thrilled to have him as an editor, and he does a great job. So he's a success story for your high school. You both are. Your high school produces good men.
Yeah, well, we called him Hooter, so next time you see him, you could use that nickname for him. Hey, Jason asked you the question, what do you recommend for young folks who are aspiring to be authors? I'll ask the same question about young folks aspiring to be reporters. What do you recommend that they do? Is college necessary? Is jumping into a job? Will you tell us what you recommend?
Sure. I think that it is important for people to ask themselves, if they want to be true journalists, are they willing to take on the responsibility of what it takes to jump into this profession? Because I think a lot of young people get in because, especially maybe with television, they think it's going to be a glamorous job or something of those lines. You really have to give yourself a good gut check, and you say, okay, is this truly what I'm going to do, really want to do with my life, and realize the challenges that come. Now, if you have a passion for, truly trying to, change the world, I think it's one of the great professions to enter. Is college necessary? It is, and here's why. You need to study not only the practice of journalism, but also the ethics of journalism, which is so vital in the time frame that we're in. It's also vitally important to study political science and history. You don't even have to major in journalism these days if you don't want to, but study English, study history, study political science, really have a good understanding of how our democracy works, and apply that. And then just like with fiction writing, it's all about perseverance. You literally have to work harder than you think you possibly ever can, but once you show your stuff, once you show how dedicated you are, it is a great profession. You never feel like you're going to work if you find what you love. And I'm extremely fortunate that, I've worked all of these years, and it's never felt like a job. It always has felt like just a really important calling, but also just a hell of a lot of fun.
Will there be a job that will be known as a newspaper reporter in the coming years, or is that some destined for extinction?
It's such a difficult thing for me to say because I love newspapers, and I have so many friends who are newspaper reporters, and I started off as a newspaper reporter. I think that in the future, there's going to be everything is going to be digital. And I'll be completely honest about that. I think that I like to think that there will always be newspapers, and I think there will be. I just think they'll be for a much smaller audience, but I think the demand is so high for the digital space. I think that's where it will come from. The challenge that journalism has to figure out is how in the world we're going to pay for things doing this. How are people going to subscribe to digital news outlets for something that they've always gotten for free. So it's a real challenge that we have to face. But man, I want to think that there's going to be a future of newspapers. I love newspapers. There's nothing better than being able to sit down and digest and slowly read through a New York Times or a Washington Post, or the Tennessean is a great newspaper here in Nashville, and really digest opinions and all of this. So I like to think, but I think we have to think realistically, and it's all going to move to the digital space.
Well, and you can see that just from the younger generation and the way they're coming up, and everything's on their iPad, their Kindles, their Nooks, you name it.
Of course.
They're downloading the magazines right there. I mean, you're able to carry an entire library now in just a tablet.
Of course, and I mean, even working for a television station, so much of what we do is we're reporting for your phone. We are reporting stories that you will watch on your phone, and that's fine. That's where it's coming from. I mean, we still want people to watch the evening news and the morning news, and the morning news is huge now in so many segments because it's where people are able to get up and start their days. But we realize this too, and so that's why you're going to see the apps for news organizations and your local television stations is what they're pushing, because they know that's where people are going.
Yeah, and people also, they want the news instantly. Instantly, they want to know what's going on instead of waiting the next day for it to show up in the newspaper. They want to know instantly, and that's what my phone alerts me all day long with news stories that are popping up. And the least thing I can think of is waiting till tomorrow to be able to read it on the front page of the newspaper.
Of course, and that the great thing about newspapers is that they will give you that analysis that you may not have gotten from just seeing the news break on your phone. You can digest what's happened, but it's interesting. That's really what we've all had to move from. Is that by the time the nightly news comes on, you may think, okay, well, I know the news of the day. I've seen it on my phone. But a news organization that has done well will say, okay, here's what happened. Here's why it happened. Here's what you need to know about it, and give you more of that in-depth information that you're not going to get from your phone. So, as news organizations, we've had to really look at what we're doing. And again, I go back to the need for investigative reporting, because, you can follow the news of the day, but, when you turn on the 6 o'clock news that night and you see an investigative report come on, that's not just a quick turn, news coming at you, that this is something that someone has spent some time on and, is important news to watch.
Jeremy, thanks so much for being with us tonight. Again, the book is called The Darkest Time of Night. Your website is jeremyfinley.com. Any social media or anything else you want to let folks know about?
My Twitter handle is real easy to remember. It's the call letters of my television station, which is WSMV Jeremy I Team. But if you look for Jeremy Finley on Twitter, I'll pop up there. Facebook, I'm easy to be found. And again, the website, jeremyfinley.com, has all the information on the book. And fellas, I so appreciate it. I had such a great time talking about the book. And just as importantly, I had a great time talking about the state of the news industry. I think it's important that we have more conversations like this.
Well, Jeremy, thanks so much. And we look forward to talking to you again at some point. You have a great night now.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We'll come back and wrap things up in just a moment. It's Beyond Reality Radio, Jason and JV.
Stay tuned for more Beyond Reality Radio.
Don't be jealous that I've been chatting online with babes all day.
Welcome back to the program. It's Beyond Reality Radio, Jason and JV. Again, thanks to Jeremy Finley for being with us. Check out his website, jeremyfinley.com. His book is called The Darkest Time of Night.
And it sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it does.
We got to check it out. So.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to read it, hey, get it in audio version.
That description is intriguing, and the fact that it was compared to something like Close Encounters also
X-Files.
said that people who like the X-Files are going to love it. So yeah, it sounds perfect for us.
Chris Carr, the X-Files is phenomenal. I love that show. So, hey, if you haven't yet, head over to facebook.com/Beyond Reality Radio. Like the Facebook page for us. Then head to beyondrealityradio.com. where you can find all the stations we air on across the country. That list is constantly being updated with new stations being added all the time, so check it often. You can also download the free iPhone and Android app if we're not on a station in your area. That allows you to listen live, catch past shows, join the online chat, and more. Or just listen anytime we're live right from the website by clicking the Listen Live tab in the upper right-hand corner of the website, and listen right there from the luxury of your computer. If you download the show from iTunes or anywhere else, do us a favor and just rate it for us, because it helps push it forward and makes it easier for people to find, and that's what it's about, just trying to get the word out.
I also like to get the word out about something else.
What?
I've used a certain web hosting company that has done me wrong, and I'm very, very angry about it. And I told them during the course of my conversations over the weekend that I was going to let everybody know that pays attention to what we're doing here, that they shouldn't use this company. And I've decided against using the name on air, but I am going to post it on my social media. So
Jimmy's venting.
I am so angry. I cannot even begin to tell you how angry I am.
Well, that's going to do it for us tonight. Make sure
angry.
So make sure you tune in tomorrow, and Jimmy won't be as angry, and it'll probably be a happier show. So, all right, you listen to Jason and JV Beyond Reality Radio. We'll catch you all tomorrow.
You grow cold when you keep holding
Yeah, you saw it. You saw how I felt about that. I am pissed off. GoDaddy. Well, it is good for my blood pressure to vent, Doug. I got to vent, and get this stuff out of my system because it's when it boils up. But all weekend long, I was dealing with this crap from GoDaddy. If you know anybody that uses GoDaddy, tell them to move to a different company. They're horrible. Horrible. Anyway, so great to end on that note. It's another great night, everybody. Thanks for being here. Good to see everybody in this hanging out with me here. I do appreciate it. So that's going to do it. I'm going to go out for a walk because it's might be storming soon. It was storming earlier, but I think it stopped for now. So take care. Have a great night.